All right, well, welcome CBGR agents and happy Wednesday. Today we're going to be having Phil with what's the name of your company?
Age resources.
Oh, there it is. And this is part two of the first session. Now, if you missed the first session, don't worry, go on to our YouTube channel and you'll be able to pick up the pieces from there. Okay. So without further ado, I'll hand it off to Phil. Phil's going to do the part two session of 1031 exchange. Phil, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Only one thing I'm going to request is that you let me screen share.
Yeah. Oh, give me 1 second.
Sure.
Phil,
Peter.
I need to hop on another meeting at 11 o'clock, so I hope you don't mind that I leave a little early.
I won't be offended.
Okay, thank you.
Well, good morning again, everyone. It's Phil with Exchange Resources. I'm going to actually take you deep today. If you didn't see part one, this might kind of go over your head. Why am I bringing this to you today? Because this is where the rubber meets the road. You know, last time when we got together, and let me just do like a 5-minute recap, we found out that the purpose of the 1031 exchange was to defer taxes from the sale of what kind of property? Rental property, business use property, vacant land, into the purchase of any one of those three. The government will literally defer all your taxes. Last time we talked about up to 20% on long-term capital gains, another 3.8 over $200,000 of gain to the healthcare program, the Obamacare. The next one is the California state tax, which is hovering between 9.3 and 13.3 today. It sounds like it might be going up in the future. I wouldn't expect it to go up before the election, probably after, because these politicians like to manipulate the elections, both sides. So the bottom line is, but you know, that's the way it is. And then lastly, you have a 25% depreciation recapture tax. And honestly, you're talking 35 to 45% cumulative potential tax on the sale of a rental property. So why would somebody want to do a 1031 exchange? Because like we said last time, the equity has gone so high. Folks, if you're not calling on single family rentals, duplex rentals, condominium rentals, 2 to 4 units, 5 units and above, you're missing the boat. And I don't mean that in a way to demean you or anything. I'm just telling you there's opportunity knocking on your door. And these people have a lot of equity because of the markets over the last 10 years. And guess what happens when these equities go up? The rents can't keep up with the value of equity in the building. So the rate of return on rent goes down because they can't raise the rent fast enough to get a better return or a decent return off the equity. And what investors do is sell and do a 1031 exchange, re-leverage, buy up, buy other places. Last time we learned you can buy anywhere in the United States. You're not stuck in California. And a lot of investors, 1 out of every 4, are leaving the state and they're going other places because the government is better. They're more balanced in terms of laws to protect not only the tenant, but the landlord as well. And you don't have that in California. And a lot of people are leaving because of that. Secondly, the taxes on these properties in those other states are lower than they are here. So, and thirdly, it's the bottom line is tenants are not quite as abusive there as they are here because they know they can get away with, you know, a lot more because of the laws that protect them here. So we see equities have gone up, but the rents haven't kept pace. So what can you do? You can start working with your favorite title person and ask them for a farm package. And that farm package is something that they will give you of these properties that we just mentioned the condos, the single family, the 2 to 4 units, the 5 units and above. And for those of you who are listening to me, who are in the commercial end of things, and I know there's a number of you here at Coldwell Banker with George Realty in the commercial division, same thing is true. They're moving out of state and they're going other places. Yes, you still have 70% that are going to stay here and exchange back in here, but you've got maybe 60%. But a lot of them are going other places. A lot of people, like we said last time, are moving their properties around because they're older. So if you get a farm package with a property that has been held for at least 20 years or longer, chances are pretty good those people are in retirement. And if they're in retirement, they want to leave the management business of residential real estate and go into 2 different types of things: triple net ownership / commercial ownership, where they don't have to babysit the tenant. I got a call from somebody yesterday. He's selling one property, a 4-plex, and he's buying a commercial building right here, very close to where your office is. Why? Because it's less headaches and they can get a good rate of return on their rent. Plus, the government doesn't bother you as much on commercial as they do on residential. And a triple net property we described last time is a property that you own where you have a big tenant and they're like a Starbucks. It could be a CVS. It could be Walgreens. It could be a Trader Joe's little shopping center, a Home Depot. There's so many triple net owners of properties that the tenant pays for the property taxes, not your client. The tenant pays for the insurance on the building, not your client. The tenant pays for the maintenance on the building, not your client. And they can get out of management and have a corporate tenant who will pay the bills, whether they keep the place open or shut, because they've committed to do that. And I'm telling you, people are going to that who've owned these properties for such a long time, especially with the baby boom thing. And investors just want to have more freedom. They want the money. They don't want as much responsibilities. So they're going into triple net. They're also choosing to go into other types of properties like DSTs. What's a DST? It's a Delaware Statutory Trust. We're going to cover some of this stuff today, but it allows you to go from residential to a fractionalized owner, because you may not have 3 or 6 or $12 million to pay for a property. So they're going to make you a partial owner as tenants in common with other investors. So the 1031 exchange will work. Can I just share something with you? Why would somebody want to sell? The answer is so they can make more income. The answer is so they've got more to appreciate with. And the third reason is to have more tax write-offs. So why would somebody want to listen to you? And here's the answer. And if you miss everything today, I want you to remember this part. You see, what's going to make them sell is something is better for them out there. And you could help them. You could work with these people who specialize in DSTs or triple net right there in your office. You've got people who do that. If you feel intimidated as a rep, you'll get a little referral fee from them. The whole point is you've got to give your client a reason to sell, because they're going to go into something that's going to be better for them. That's the name of the game. And if they find that to be more attractive, they're going to list with you. It will create more business with you. Don't believe me? Go talk to the people out there that are doing this. I'm telling you, it works. In fact, last time we offered you 20 different marketing letters. Some of them talk about leaving California and going other places. Some of them talk about people who already live in other parts of the country who own property in California, and about exchanging and not paying the taxes to move the properties closer to where they live. I mean, there are so many opportunities out there. There's so much, but you'll never know until you knock on the door you start sending them letters, you get in touch with them and start talking about these things. And we have already provided the letters. So if you haven't asked for them, it's up to you. If you ask for them and you don't use them, that's on you, because you will reap what you sow. You put seed in the ground and water it, it comes up. You do nothing and put nothing in the ground, weeds come up. It's what you want out of your business. I'm not here to shame you or demean you, but I want you to think about your business and what do you want to accomplish in 2024. That's why we're here today, to talk about the next step in the 1031 exchange. It's the advanced portion. It's the difficult questions many of your clients are going to ask, not just what we did last time, and you have to go back and watch that because it will really help you. Watch it several times. It will help you remember things so you can explain more freely and easily. But today comes the more hard questions, the more difficult questions, and that's what we're going to talk about. So let's turn the page and let's begin. Remember, you can't give tax advice and neither can I. You cannot give legal advice and neither can I. But what can we do? We can talk with people about some of these things, especially from the first part of what we did last time. But some of these, if you don't feel comfortable with them, you contact me, you have them contact their CPA or a tax attorney that can help them. These are the more difficult questions. You and I don't give that, but we do give them information that will help them make a decision to whether or not a 1031 exchange into a property that will generate more income, appreciation, and tax write-offs will be better for them. So let's start. Number one, what happens when you have multiple owners? And can they all go their separate ways if they decide to sell a property? You know how many times I get that call every day? I've got 3 owners or 5 owners. I've had 20, 26, 28 owners. They went together. The question is, could they sell the property? Could some not exchange? Could some exchange? What can happen? The answer is, it depends on the way they hold title. Did you get that? That's why it's so important. Anytime that you think you're going to get a listing, you need to talk to your title person. A lot of you can get a property profile right here on your telephone. The title companies provide that to you. You want to read the most recent deed, the ownership vesting of the property, and see what kind of ownership there is. There is all kinds of ways to hold title. Now, if the property is not held in a partnership, now remember, don't forget what I'm going to tell you. A partnership doesn't mean some of us get together and buy a property. That is not a partnership. A legal partnership is when you file all your tax returns as a partnership. It's got to be a deliberate filing of a partnership. It doesn't mean just because 3 of us or 10 of us own a property together, it's a partnership. It's not. It's a partnership if you file it on your tax return as a partnership. Or another name for a partnership is a thing like a LLC or an S Corp or a C Corp or a limited partnership. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But as long as they are not in a legal partnership, but hold title as tenants in common or joint tenants, they could go their own individual ways. One may exchange, 2 of them may go together, 1 or 2 may say, no, I'm not interested, I'm just going to pay the taxes. And that is allowable if it's not a legal partnership. So they can exchange or not exchange because of the way their individual partnership or their owner, I should say ownership, is held. So tenants in common, good. Joint tenants, good. Partnership, big difference. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So what are legal partnerships? What kind of questions? If you find out that there are multiple people who own the property, you need to find out, are they individuals or are they tenants in common? Or is it an LLC that owns the property? Why do people begin LLCs? They begin an LLC because they don't want the liability of somebody getting hurt on the property and suing them or falsely suing them. They want to protect other things that they own away from the what do you call it? Somebody suing them, so they can't touch their private ownership, their private properties, their 401ks, their investments, their IRAs. They could only sue the ownership, which is the partnership. Do you see the difference between partnership and owning title as tenants in common? Because when you have title as tenants in common, you're exposed to a lawsuit, and they can come after you personally, not just after the property. But when you have an LLC, a limited liability company, they allow you to create this ownership called the ABC LLC, whatever you want to call it. And it protects you from the people who are coming after you. Worst thing they can take is the property, but nothing more. Okay, that's important. So, and there's different kinds of LLCs. There's disregarded, there's non-disregarded. We won't get too deep into that today because you're really going to have to become a scientist to understand all this. There's also corporations. There's S corps, there's C corps. That is a partnership. You need to find out who are the deciding owners of this partnership, the shareholders. Next, there are trusts. People have a trust. My wife and I have a living trust. And the bottom line is, in our living trust, we set up the trust not to protect us from liability. We have insurance for that. But we set up the trust for the purpose of when we pass, we would avoid probate, right? That's the purpose of a trust, to avoid probate. You can pay $2,500, $4,000, whatever, for a trust. But what you're skipping is paying $450 or $550 an hour to an attorney to probate your estate. And that trust does that. That's a wonderful thing. The second thing a trust does, it allows you to be able to work with the people that are going to inherit your property. So you say, you can't have this for a while, or you can only have it in certain increments. You can continue to decide how they get it and when they get it and who gets it. And the third thing a trust does for you, if you're on my email list, this week we sent out what's the difference between a revocable and irrevocable trust. And those are really different, especially when it comes to 1031 exchanges. But the whole point is, it lets you, at least with the revocable trust, it allows you to get a stepped up basis to your tenants. I mean, not to your tenants, but to your owners or your beneficiaries. As an example, if I bought the property, my wife and I buy property, $300,000 a bunch of years ago, and now it's worth $5 million. When we pass, the survivor receives the property, not with that huge capital gain between $300,000 and $5 million, which is a $4.7 million gain. The survivor receives the property at a stepped up basis in a revocable family trust, which means if they turn around and sell the property, they pay no tax. All those taxes I quoted to you earlier, they don't do it. Your clients need to go see an estate planning attorney to set up this kind of trust for them. Did you know the trust can also be the shareholder of the LLC? You can do that. There's so many options, but it's not that you're giving out tax and legal advice. You're sending them to people who can't. You're just kind of whetting their appetite so they can set up the ownership of their properties in a way. You would be doing something that a lot of the other brokers don't do, whether it's a residential or commercial or industrial building. Why would you do that? Because you're helping the client. You're giving them information that'll be valuable to them. And do you know what that means? If they're getting value out of it, they're going to trust you more as an agent. They're going to turn to you when you talk to them about releveraging the equity to buy bigger, better properties other places. They're going to want to work with you more because you're helping them with more. Next, there's limited partnerships. The limited partnerships are very important to understand. We don't have a lot of time to go over this today. I know we're not going to go over all the information I've got prepared for you today. And maybe we'll do a part 3, who knows? But the bottom line is, a limited partnership is when you own a part of the company, shares of the company, but you can't make any decisions of what happens with the company. Like somebody wants you to go into a project with them and it's a limited partnership or some kind of LLC, you don't get involved. You just simply own a part, not of the building, not of the real estate, but the stock ownership of that partnership. So that's what you own. So you have to ask the question, who owns the property? And when I sell the property, how do I buy the new property? Do I buy it in the same name? Do I change the name? Can I change the name? And I want you to look at the bottom. Remember, this is so important. To the United States government, to the Internal Revenue Service, and to the state of California, the Franchise Tax Board, your ownership is not the name. It's the tax ID number of the property. That is so important because you might sell in your, let's say, trust and might buy in your corporation, which I never recommend, but if you did, or an LLC, the tax ID numbers may be completely different. And they won't recognize that as a 1031 exchange because they recognize the numbers more than they do the name of that partnership. So whatever the EIN or the TIN is, or the Social Security number is, that number, that tax ID, that taxpayer that sells must remain the same taxpayer that buys. So it shows from the same tax ID number to the sale and the purchase, it was always the owners. It was always doing the trading and it bought the replacement property. But if you sell in one LLC and buy it into a different one or into a corporation or some other different tax ID reporting number, that's not a 1031 exchange because the number that sold never bought a replacement property. This is very important information. So the seller must purchase the replacement property within the 1031 exchange, and the seller is known not so much by the name, but by the tax ID number. All right, I don't know if this is too heavy duty, but it's going to get worse now. What happens if you have a partnership who wants to sell a property? Example, a 5-member LLC. A 2-member LLC, and these 2 members are not married to each other. Maybe they're friends, maybe they're relatives, but they're not married to each other. What happens if they want to go their separate ways in a 1031 exchange? And the answer is, you know, if it's in a partnership, how do you do that? Because you don't own the property, you own the partnership. Remember, we talked about limited liability and how to file for tax purposes? The government will allow you to do one of 2 things. And you want to go separately, you don't want to buy together. There's something called a drop and swap and a swap and drop. Those are 2 technical terms. You need to go separate ways. And I'm going to show you what that means. If you go with the first drop and then swap, what does drop mean? Drop means we don't hold title together. We're going to dissolve the title and retitle the property into individuals as opposed to a partnership. Now, let's say there's 3 of us. We can set up 3 individual LLCs under our tax ID number. You can do that. You can have single member LLCs. So the bottom line is the 3 of us will hold title, whether it's a single member LLCs, whether it's trust. You can have a trust, I can have the LLC, somebody will just have their name. It doesn't matter. What matters is we'll dissolve the title of the partnership, the LLC, and hold title as tenants in common for 2 years. 24 months. That means we cannot even enter into a sales contract according to the state of California for 24 months. That's one option. Drop, change the title, hold for 2 years, and swap means to exchange. But once you hold, you have to hold it for 24 months or 2 years. The other option is to swap and drop. What is that? A swap and drop says you're going to sell the property and do a 1031 exchange. Who is? The owner of the property, the taxpayer, the LLC. And then the LLC will buy 3 properties, one for me, one for another person who is doing the exchange, who is part of the partnership, and one for the third party who's doing the exchange in the partnership. But it's the LLC that's doing the exchanging, not them. And after it finishes the 1031 exchange, it must hold those 3 properties it bought for each one of us for 2 years, 24 months, just like it says below here. Then you can dissolve the partnership, and the partnership will deed your property to you, her property to her, and my property to me. And now we have a good 1031 exchange. It took us a little bit of time, to 2 years, whether we drop and swap or swap and drop, but it gives us that opportunity to be able to do the 1031 exchange. Now, I know this might be new for some of you. Even if you're in commercial, this might be new. But the whole point is that we will help you. We will send you also to your tax people so they will verify that this is the right way to go. Now, some of the people some of the tax professionals do not understand all this. And the bottom line is you'll have to go to somebody who does, or maybe we can refer you to somebody. But you really need a highly specialized CPA to help you. I saw somebody raise a hand and I know it disappeared, so I'm not sure who did.
It was me, Phil Rubin.
But are we getting too heavy duty technical?
No. I just wanted to ask, when you indicated that, the swap and drop and buying 3 different properties for 3 different partners, right? All of them have to keep it for 2 years. What happens if one doesn't? Does it affect all 3?
Well, remember, they're not going to own the property. The LLC in a swap and drop owns the property. It's selling one. Let's say it's selling a $3 million building, and each of us are shareholders of equal amount, just to make it simple. It buys 3 properties. The LLC will continue to own the 3 properties because the LLC did the 1031 exchange. Now, after the exchange is over, it must hold those 3 properties, ownership by the LLC, for 2 years. After the end of remember, you can't just drop because you're committed. You have shares in this LLC, and this LLC is preparing you to have this property that you've chosen to own. And you can't have title to it for 2 years. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm just curious if title is for one reason or another changed on one of the properties, then it affects all 3.
It can't, yeah. It's got to stay in the ownership of the LLC for
Got it.
24 months, 2 years.
Thank you, Phil.
Now, let's say you want out. Okay. And, you for whatever personal reason. Well, guess what we can do? The other 2 people, we can buy your shares out and you can walk away, pay taxes on the shares of your LLC. And now the 2 of us going to be 50% owners instead of 1/3 owners because you're gone. And then we'll figure out what to do with that 3rd property, whether we'll own it together as tenants in common, or we'll sell it, do an exchange, and do 2 properties. One for the other person, one for me. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Phil.
That is an option. Okay.
Phil, I have another question.
Peter, go ahead.
For example, if an individual owns the property and then he 1031 exchange it to an LLC with himself as the sole LLC member.
That's a
and then
disregarded entity.
And hold the property for 2 years, and then later on at 2 years, he wants to admit another LLC member, maybe 20% or 30%.
Yeah, but that's a taxable sale. If you're going to sell shares, So if it's my LLC, Peter, right?
Yeah,
And then you want to kind of come into it and you want 25% of ownership in the LLC, I can do that. But that's on me. That's a taxable sale. I'm selling you 25% of the membership ownership
So
of
what
my
happened to-
LLC. That's
so what-
taxable. I have to pay taxes on that money. You can't do a 1031 exchange on shares, only on
Oh.
properties.
I see, only on properties. So the 1031 exchange would not hold for the previous
No, it will hold for the previous. But my giving you or selling you,
the LLC membership.
I have to pay tax on that because it's a sale on a gain. The
Mhm.
LLC made money. That's why this is so important, that even though I'm bringing this information to you, and by the way, I give this out to the tax attorneys and the CPAs. Some of them still have a hard time understanding it, but a lot of them get it. And that's the way they've been practicing because they're very good at real estate transactions from a tax point of view. So as long as you're working with somebody who knows and understands what we're talking about, you'll be fine.
Yeah, so in other words, the 1031 exchange will still hold, but then he has to pay the tax for the portion that he sells to a third person.
Remember, I don't own the properties.
Yeah,
I'm just an LLC shareholder,
right.
right? So if
Right.
I'm going to sell you 25% of the shares, I got to pay capital gains taxes on the 25% of shares. And I can't do a 1031 exchange of it because it's not property I'm selling you. I'm selling you shares because I'm not supposed to own the property. And that's why people can't come after me because I don't own the property. I'm just a shareholder.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I really like talking about this. I know it's difficult, but I'm telling you, this can help you create all kinds of opportunities for your clients. You can get new business as a result of this. You're not going to explain all this to your clients, but the bottom line is you can cook them up with me. I'll send them information they could read, and we'll tell them to go talk to their CPA about it, because you and I don't give out tax advice, but we can send them information to send them to other people who do have tax licenses and law degrees in real estate to be able to explain something like this out. Here's
Phil, what about this scenario? If the person has individually owned the property and then he 1031 exchange to a LLC with the with another LLC member to be in the LLC that he established. What happened to the 1031 exchange that he wants to get in?
Well, remember what we just said a few minutes ago? The taxpayer that sells, the tax ID number that sells, has to be the same tax ID number that buys. If I'm selling a property and you and I are starting up a partnership, hold the property in an LLC, that's not going to be the same tax number. I can't do it.
Oh, in other words, he cannot use the LLC to receive the property?
Well, yeah, because it's not the number that's held the property I sold.
Oh. I see what you mean. Oh,
yeah.
okay.
The numbers have to stay the same.
Now, what about if he 1031 exchange to his same tax ID, and later on he has to put the property into the LLC, which he formed later on. Would that be permissible?
Yeah, they can drop and then swap. But after they drop the title and dissolve it, and they have the new LLC that owns the property.
Yeah.
No sale, just changing. Then he has to wait for how long before they sell?
2 years. 2 years.
That's the key.
Okay.
Always have your client talk to your CPA, their CPAs.
Okay.
Like I said, and here's the unfortunate part, Peter. A lot of CPAs don't understand what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
They just do tax returns. They're bookkeepers. They're not proficient in real estate. This is a high intense part of owning properties and how to sell and buy. And when you can do that, you'll be great. You can do all kinds of things, but you got to learn how to stay within the lane, right? You got to stay in your lane to make sure that what the government is asking you to do is going to be done their way. So if they audit you, you're clean.
Okay.
All right. Here's a big deal. Now we're going to get off of this drop and swap investing. This is one, I've been speaking professionally on this subject for nearly 26 years now. 26 years. And I speak at 120 to 150 of these seminars every single year, like I am with you right now. There are basically three questions I get a lot of. The identification period, if there's any extension to it. And this is a really good question. Can I do a 1031 exchange, wait for a little while, like 6 months or whatever, and then move into the property as my personal residence? Because remember we said the identification of like kind means you're selling investment property and you're buying other investment property. So if I sold a commercial building and I bought a single family in San Marino and rented it out, is that a like kind property? The answer is yes, because it's a sale of investment real estate and it's a purchase of investment real estate. But you got to listen to this part. Can I move into it? Here's the answer. Be careful. The answer to this question is this, what you see on the lower left-hand side in red. Have your client speak to their CPA. Do not answer that question. Why? You just crossed the lane. You just crossed the line. You are now giving them legal and tax advice. And you can't do that because your E&O is not going to support you. You're going to have to defend, because if they get caught, they're going to blame you for giving them this advice. So don't do it. But can I talk to you about it a little bit so you'll understand why you shouldn't do it? You see, when you do a 1031 exchange, you see the box on top. It says that the new replacement property must be purchased with the intent to hold for investment. That's what makes a commercial building and a residential building like kind. It's investment property they were holding, and then they sold, and they did a 1031 exchange into other investment property. And if you have a single family, big home in San Marino or Arcadia or wherever it happens to be, that's allowable. It's like kind. But if you're planning to move into it, that's not like kind anymore. And if the government figures it out, they'll disallow your 1031 exchange out of your commercial building into their residential building, because they're going to feel that you had the intent to move in. You're trying to manipulate the tax code for your own personal use, and the government doesn't like that. Somebody has a training room question, hand raise.
Oh, yeah, it's me again, Ruben.
Hey, Ruben, thank you.
So when you say like kind, is that the scenario you gave, going from a residential property, income investment property to a commercial investment property?
Or the other way around.
Or the other way around, the likeness here being investment, right? Rental. Is that because it's written so vaguely, or is it intentionally put there as a like kind, or we're just using that as kind of like a loophole?
Okay, it's not a loophole. It's flexibility that the government will let you change your investment, not just from one commercial building to another commercial building, not one warehouse to another warehouse, but they'll let you sell that and put it into other property that you're going to rent out and keep it as an investment. Keep it, hold it, not convert it for personal use. You can't convert it to a second home or a vacation home. You cannot convert it into a personal residence. It destroys the like kindness of the exchange from the sale of investment property to the acquisition of other investment property. I'm so grateful. I hope you get this. I'm so grateful, Ruben, that the IRS is willing to let me go from commercial to residential. Let me tell you something. Did you know the IRS tried to overturn that rule like 20 years ago? and say, no, you gotta go from residential to residential. You can't deviate out of it. You have to go from commercial to commercial. You can't deviate it. Like, for example, what's residential to residential? Does that mean a single family to a 12-unit apartment building? Because they're both considered residential to the federal government, not to your lender, but it is to the federal government. So how do you distinguish a single family to a triplex? It's both residential. So, and then we talked to Congress about it, and Congress told the IRS they had to keep it the way it is. There's flexibility. So you remember we said earlier, when you're talking to people who own property for like 20 years or longer, and maybe, you know, their hair looks like mine and they're old and they want to be able to get out of residential management and go to a triple net property, like we said, or a fractionalized ownership of a triple net property. That's exactly what they're talking about. The intent that what you've been renting out or using as your business, you can go into another rental property. They're just not telling you you have to stay in residential to residential. They're not telling you have to go from industrial to industrial, M zone to M zone, C zone to C zone. They're not telling you that. They're telling you investment property to investment property, but not with the intent to use it personally. Business-wise, yes. Personal living in, no. Second homes and vacation homes and personal residence cannot be in the mix of a 1031 exchange. Does that make sense, Ruben?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
it completely makes sense.
okay, great.
So at no point in the future can that be used as personal residence? Is that right? Or can?
That's a good question. I'm going to answer that right now.
Okay.
It depends. Depends on what? Number one, that you had no intent to convert it. But number two, look at the box on the bottom. If something happens to your, look, can your life change? Can you get medically ill? I don't mean like a cold. I'm talking like a disability or something. Accidents happen. What if your spouse dies or divorces you? What if you have a personal financial downturn where you start going to bankruptcy and you start losing everything, but you have to convert that rental into a personal residence? Can that happen unexpectedly with no intent to have that happen? Of course. And the government understands that. But you can't do it with the intent to do that. You have to buy the property with the intent to, like it says in the first box, hold for investment. Does that mean 2 years? Does that mean 5 years? That means 10 years? They won't tell you. Why? Because if you told them 5 years, you would hold it for 5 years and then convert it to personal. So they're not going to tell you. It's got to be with the intent to hold. But bottom box, you see where it says unexpected, unanticipated, unplanned? Life happens, folks. And that does happen. Not to everybody, but it does. If it interrupts your holding situation because of a disaster, personal disaster in your life, hardship, whatever you want to call it, then have your client go talk to their CPA, not you, to determine that they can demonstrate in an audit, if this were ever to be audited, that they can show them that you never had the intent to move in, that you bought it purely with the intent to rent it out or hold it for investment. Ruben, does that make sense?
It does. Just kind of thinking of how they would be able to determine if your intent was there or not, you know? So that's kind of like,
I'm going to say this very carefully. It's not your job to do that. It's their CPA's job to do that.
got it.
Peter, do you want people launching lawsuits
No.
on CV George because they told him it was okay to move into the property after doing a 1031 exchange?
Definitely not. Definitely not.
How about holding it for two years and then moving into it? You're going to tell them that it's okay?
Oh,
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
You know, right? But
Yeah.
let me ask you a question. And I know this is being recorded, so I have to say this very careful. Peter, Ruben, Phil, have we ever broken the speed limit and gone over 65 miles an hour? Maybe 80? Maybe more? Did we get a ticket? No, because we didn't get caught. What if the government doesn't audit you? Well, then you don't have to worry about it, I guess. But if you do get caught and they do audit you, your CPA has to prove, or you have to prove, that you bought the property to hold it, never to move into it, but something unexpected, unanticipated, or unplanned change. Let me just tell you a really quick story about this, and we'll go to the next slide. 2 years ago, year and a half ago, I was speaking at a big CPA conference. You know who the speaker was before me? They had a list of different speakers, and I was there to educate, because I do that for the CPAs, the tax attorneys and whatnot. So they said, the speaker before me was from the IRS. And then they told me like a week before I was going to speak, when they had the agenda, when I was going to come on, so when I could show up. They said, by the way, you're coming on after the IRS. And they said, by the way, they might stick around to hear what you have to say. So I got nervous. But he did. And for 2 hours, I lectured on this slide presentation that I'm talking to you about right now. And there was a lot of information I had to go through with these CPAs. After I was finished, it was on a Saturday afternoon, I was done. I started heading for the door. I got my laptop, my briefcase, got everything packed up, and started going out the door because I wanted to go home. But the IRS agent chased me out. He chased me to outside. And I go, oh, I'm in trouble now. Guess what he said? He said that was the most accurate 1031 exchange presentation he has ever heard. He says, that's exactly what you said. And he paid me a couple compliments, which I was so honored to have him tell me that. So when I'm telling you today, all of you who are watching this, I think there's 18 of us that are on right now, including me. Be careful, especially drop and swap, swap and drop, and this. These are so important. And the next couple things I'm going to show you are also very important to the IRS. And if you do it the right way, let them audit you. You're going to be fine because your CPA can defend it. Be careful if he can't, or she can't, then you're in big trouble. Any other questions about this before I turn the slide? All right, next slide. Oh, Carol, what's on your mind?
Hi, Phil. I was wondering because if you do a 1031 exchange from California to another state, and it sounds like there are different rules and regulations with the different states. So which state do you go by?
That's a good question. Here's the answer. You can exchange in this federal tax code into any federal state, which happens to be the entire United States of America. That includes Hawaii and Alaska. So if I sell it here, I can buy in Alaska, I can buy in Hawaii, I can buy in Texas, I can buy in Florida, I can buy in Tennessee, I can buy in New York, I can buy anywhere in the US. All right. That state has to recognize federal law. And federal law says this is a federal tax code. You will follow this, states. Now, California has done a modification on one part of the exchange, of which I've got a slide for. If I get to it this morning, I'm going to show it to you and go over it. So if you can just hang in there for a few minutes with me, I'll get to that slide and I will go over what California has done. But they can't circumvent it because California came up they were voting on and said you could only exchange California state tax in California. But if you decide to buy in Nevada or, Florida or wherever you want to exchange, you might be able to defer the federal tax, but not the state tax. 3 times the IRS stepped in, and so did Congress, and said, no, you have to abide, even with state tax, this federal code of buying in other places. So California came up with a new modification called a clawback provision, and I will get to it as it'll come up in the next few slides.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense, though? That you're going to abide by the same rules, because it's a federal tax code?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. My pleasure. Okay, next. Let's say you had to convert a property. Let's say you did a 1031 exchange. And then you had to move into it because there was something that was unexpected, unanticipated, unplanned. And you had to move into it. So guess what Congress created in, I think it was October of 2004. They created something called the 5-year hold. What is that? Well, after exchanging, if you need to move into that replacement property for a legitimate reason, and then live in the property for 2 years, and then sell it, and now you want the $500,000 off the 121 principal residence exclusion if you're married, or if you want the $250,000 if you're individual, single, guess what the government said? In 2004, in October, they said no more unless you hold the property for 5 full years. What were they trying to do? They were trying to discourage people saying after a couple of years, well, I have to move into it because something changed, and maybe it was legitimate, maybe it was not. So they wanted to slow down the actual conversion. So guess what they did? They invented the 5-year hold rule. So you have to have physical ownership of the new replacement property for 5 years. And if you move into it and then sell it, you have to live in it for at least 2 of those whole 5-year hold. And then they'll let you take the 500,000 or the 250 and then pay the taxes if the gain is above that to the federal and the state government. All right.
Well,
Yes.
so the 2 years could be part of the 5 years?
Yes.
Okay.
However, be careful, because they changed the law again. And I'm going to show you that. See the next bullet point? You have to take into the last one on the bottom. You have to take into account the Housing and Economic Recovery Act of 2008. What I just told you of the 5-year hold has to be held for 5 years beginning 2004. That's 20 years ago. Then in 2008, in October, they passed this thing I just showed you, the last bullet point on the bottom, the Housing and Recovery Act of 2008. Okay, Ruben, let me just tell you right now. Peter, I'll tell you the same thing, and anybody who's listening to me. Anytime the government gives you a recovery act or something to help you with, they're going to stick it to you on the back end. That's right, whoever put the confetti is right on target. They're going to stick it to you. If they're going to give you something here, they're going to take a lot away to give it to you, but they're going to call it a recovery act or something to help you, when really they're not. Let me show you what they did yet again. The Housing and Recovery Act of 2008 is this. If beginning January 1st, 2009, because that's when it went into effect, they passed it in 2008 in October, but it didn't go into effect until January 1st of 2009. It allows for a conversion. You know what a conversion is? Is this a conversion? Well, maybe, but the conversion is what they're talking about, is moving into a property you already own that is not your primary residence. So it's called a non-primary residence conversion. So you move into your second home, your vacation home, your rental property, whether you exchanged into it or not. It's been that way since January 1st, 2009, but now you want to move into it. And then you're going to hold it for 2 years as your principal residence. Are you with me so far? So you convert your second home, your vacation home, your rental property, and then you move into it, and then you hold it for 2 years, whether you exchange into it or not. And then you sell the property. Now you want your $500,000 as a married couple, off a principal residence exclusion under 121, or $250,000 as an individual. Well, guess what this House Recovery Act of 2008 did? Remember I told you they give you something here, but they're going to take a lot more away from you? They are now forcing the CPAs that if your client or you do a conversion of a non-principal residence you already own, not a new purchase that you're going to live in. We're talking about property you own that's not your principal residence. Your second home, your vacation home, your rental property, or your business use property. And you move into it beginning of January 1st, 2009 or later. Your CPA has to distinguish the difference between what they call qualified years versus non-qualified years. We're talking about the exclusion of the 250 or 500. What's not qualified? The answer is the time you did not live in it as a principal residence. What is qualified? The time you did live in it as a principal residence. So what happens is you sell the property, your CPA is doing the tax return. He said, look, I've lived in it for 2 of the last 5 years. The last 2 years, I qualify for the 121. And they're going to say, sorry, not according to this law, this Recovery Act that they passed in 2008 that went in effect in 2009. So if you had it for, let's say, 15 years, but you lived in it for 2 years, but it was not qualified as a principal residence for the previous 12 or 13 years, they're going to do a ratio of qualified versus non-qualified, and that's what you're going to get off the 500 or the 250. They're not going to give you the whole thing anymore, folks, because you converted a non-principal residence that you already owned into a principal residence beginning January 1st, 2009 to present.
Bill,
Yeah, you better take a deep breath before you ask me the question, because I don't want anybody to suffocate on this.
now I just want to reiterate. So if that ratio comes out to, let's just say 25%, then you're allowed 25% of, let's just say the 500,000 from a married couple as exemption, right?
But they didn't know that.
Okay.
They thought they're going to get 500,000 of exclusion. Now they're only going to get $125,000 of exclusion. They're going to pay taxes on the other 350. They're going to get a monster tax bill, and they're going to be floored. They're going to say, why did this happen? Why didn't anybody tell me about this? Well, that's the tax people's job to do this kind of thing. But I do have a write-up on this. And if you want some information, it's not really much more detailed than what I just gave you, because we have to be very careful about giving tax advice versus just information. And we stay within our lane. But does that make sense? If a client says, well, why don't I just move in it and live in it for 2 years and sell it? Oh, I'll get the 500,000. I don't have to worry about the 1031 exchange. Or if it's a second home, I'd have to pay the tax anyway, because you can't do a 1031 exchange on the second home or vacation home. Do you realize how much heartache there is in this? Careful. Okay, next, we're going to talk about relatives. A very sore subject to some. The government asked, or I got to move this because I can't see my pictures. Are there government rules if one sells or purchases with a relative in a 1031 exchange? And the answer is, oh, yes, there is. The government has rules about what they call relatives, but what is the definition of the relative? Well, it's very easy. It's the people that you argue with on Thanksgiving and Christmas or any other holiday that you get together with. No. That's just a bad joke. What is the definition of a relative? Look at the box to the left. A relative is considered a related party. So that's the real word that the IRS uses for relative, related party. The definition of a related party is a direct lineage. You know what lineage is? It's a grandparent to a grandchild, direct lineage. That's a related party. Between parents and their children, that's a related party. Siblings to each other, so your brothers and sisters, and whoever they marry becomes legal lineage. Children, married people to each other are considered related parties. You cannot do an exchange with a related party when you're buying, but you can sometimes when you're selling. So how do you figure that out? Let's look at the right side where the green box is. First of all, can I sell to a related party if they fit in the box on the left? The answer is yes. Ruben, if you're my brother, you are a related party to me. But Ruben, what if you are my cousin? Are you a related party to me? The answer is no. You're not a direct lineage. You may be my father's or my mother's nephew or niece, but that's not a related party according to what the IRS is telling us in the box on the left. An aunt, an uncle, a cousin is not, but a direct lineage is. So if you are my brother or you're married to my sister, that makes you my brother-in-law. You're a direct related party to me. So I can sell you a property that I've been renting out and do a 1031 exchange on this property I'm selling you, and then buy another replacement property. And then after the exchange is over, both you, because you bought my property, and myself, because I sold you that property, have to hold both of our properties for the next 2 years. Cannot be sold. You cannot sell the property I sold you. I cannot sell the property that I bought as my upleg in my 1031 exchange. Now, as a result of that, can't sell those properties. But knowing Ruben, he might ask me a question, or Peter. They say to me, well, what if one of us do that? The answer is the government knows. Why? Because anytime you do business, whether you're selling or buying from a related party, the CPA has to check a box that in a form called the 8824 form. The 8824 form, they attach to your Schedule E on your tax return because you have investment property and that you sold or bought. So what the government says, they ask a lot of questions on that 8824 form. And one of the questions they ask, did you buy or sell with a related party? And if the CPA doesn't answer that or answers it no, that's fraudulent. The CPA can go to jail for that and lose his license. So they have to say, yes, it was a related party. That makes sense? Even if you're married to them, they're a related party. Okay, so you can sell to a related party, but after the exchange is over for me, both Ruben, who bought my relinquished property, and me, after I buy my replacement property, we have to hold those two properties for 2 years. Then we're fine to sell them afterwards. But what if I'm buying from a related party? Let's say Peter is my brother, all right? You can tell by the family resemblance, right? So let's say I buy his property. He wants to sell a property. Or if I have an elderly mother or, or I have young kids who bought property, they're all related party to me, right? So the question is, can I buy their property to get them out of their property and do a 1031 exchange to buy their property as a replacement? The answer is no way. The government will not let you buy a replacement property from your related party. except for one reason. And the one reason that they will allow you is that the other party that you buy from, whether it's Peter or whoever it is, who is your related party that you're buying from? Your mother, your young child who bought a home and now can't afford the payments, and you want to buy it from them as a replacement so they don't go into foreclosure? The government says, sorry, because who you buy from, because they're related to you, has to do a 1031 exchange. But here's a problem. We're talking about them selling me their primary residence. They can't do a 1031 exchange on the sale of a primary residence. What if it's a second home or a vacation home up at Lake Arrowhead? Well, you can't do a 1031 exchange on a second home or a vacation home. So that property, because of that relationship, they won't let me buy it as a up leg to my 1031 exchange. Both parties have to do an exchange if you're going to buy from a related party. If you're not buying from a related party, no problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's not only the people involved, it's also the property qualifying.
Yeah, how they're treating the property. If they're filing a tax return each year on it, showing that it's rented, no problem. But if they're not, it's disqualified. And the CPA makes them check the box and sign it under penalty of perjury that it is a related party. Some people say, yeah, but Peter, you married my sister, so she's no longer an Antoine. So how will they know? They know because they go back they track tax ID numbers to see if there was a relationship at one point. Now, what happens if you and my sister divorce? Can I buy your principal residence? The answer is yes, because you're no longer legally married to her. Now you're no longer a related party because the relationship was severed via divorce or death. So have your clients check with their CPAs on this. Next, Carol, here we go. You asked me this question. I was talking to you about the California clawback. Well, here it is. Oh, by the way, before I tell you about the California clawback, Ruben, what's my drop dead time to stop this today?
Let's see, what time do we have right now? We got about 20 minutes, 22
Okay, good.
minutes.
Perfect. Okay, I'll try to talk a little faster. Remember I told you that you can exchange into any state in the US? By the way, what if your client lives here, but they own property in China? They own property in Mexico. They own property in Brazil. They own property in Israel or Arab Emirates or France. Can they sell their property in France and because they're a US citizen, they live here, and buy property? Somebody just sent me an email about that last night. And buy property here in the US. The answer is, and do a 1031 exchange. The answer is no. No way. Can I sell property here and buy property in Timbuktu, whatever country in the world that's not the US? The answer is no. A 1031 exchange is between a domestic sale to a domestic purchase, US to US. But they also say you can sell foreign property that you own in other countries, because if it's a rental, you have to report that on your tax return or it's tax fraud. And California will come after you because you have to pay world tax to the state of California. So if you have property or business other places in the world and you don't tell California and they find out about it, they come after you. They're very serious. They want your money. You also have to report it to the federal government. So let's go back to property now only. So by the way, domestic for domestic, yes, you can exchange. Foreign for foreign, yes. Can I blend the two together? Absolutely not. The government will not let you do it. It has to be domestic to domestic or foreign to foreign investment properties. Okay, having said that, what if I want out of California? I can get a better rate of return The laws are going to protect me as a landlord much more than California will, where there's a little more balance. So and how many people were, folks, since the pandemic, just me alone, and one of the largest independent 1031 exchange company. I'm just one of the salespeople, but I do the lion's share of the business. And the question is, I've just noticed since the pandemic, roughly 25% of every exchange I do here in California with my client base, which is huge, they go to other states. They're fleeing California. That's why I said you should be talking to these people. And a couple of my marketing letters are targeted towards people who are very frustrated with our state because it could be new listings for you. All right? All right. California said, no, you cannot exchange out of state. You can for federal taxes, but not for California state taxes. 3 times, like I said to Carol earlier, the IRS said, no, you cannot do this. Well, guess what? California said, we're going to have to come up with something better. So guess what they came up with? The California Clawback. Now, when you hear about a clawback, if you think about it, now I don't have a picture of our flag on the left because it couldn't fit really good and I couldn't find one that, so I put the Golden Gate Bridge and everybody can kind of relate to that, you know, up in San Francisco in the Bay Area. But here's the question. What if I sold a property in California, did a 1031 exchange, and I bought in Hawaii, or I bought in Texas, or I buy in Memphis, Tennessee? California, the picture of the flag has a bear. The bear has a claw. California says we will claw back on you if you eventually sell that property. And whatever you deferred from the state of California to your Tennessee property when you did a 1031 exchange into that from your California property, if you sell the Tennessee property and do not do another 1031 exchange, we will come back to you and you owe us the money and we will chase you for it. And the question is, you can say, how are they going to know? Here's the answer. You see on the bottom in red, it says 3840. The taxpayer is required to file an annual state form, whether they live in California or they've left California. They have to file to California a 3840. And if you do not do that every year, and there's just one form, but if you do not do that, California comes and claws back because you did not file. So they're going to come and chase you and take you to court and beat you. So the whole point is you have to do, if you do a sale, if you sold here, you go to Tennessee, 10 years later, you decide to sell it, you can do another 1031 exchange and pay nothing to California. Let's say you buy into Utah and you buy a property up there. I'm trying to think of that city though. A lot of Park City, that's it. Park City, Utah, a lot of big ski resort, very popular. Prices there are astronomically high. So what if you do a 1031 exchange in the Park City, but then later on you sell it and you don't do a full or a partial exchange? Guess what California does? They claw back on you because you have to file this form, the 3840, every single year because California was bitter and angry that you left the state. So now they have provisions to come after you for the tax that you deferred when you sold way back in 2024. And now that it's 2040, they can come after you because you sold and did not do another 1031 exchange. What happens when you die? Well, if it's in a trust, you get a stepped up basis, or you don't, you died. Your heirs get a stepped up basis. California can get nothing from you now. They can't chase you anymore, and you don't have to file this form anymore because you died. Make sense? Be careful. They're out to get your money. And you got to do what they tell you to do, and you have to file that 3840 form every single year, and you'll be okay. Okay. Oh, here's a good one. Remember last year with all the rain that we got? Oh, by the way, is there any questions before I go to the next slide?
Bill, there's one on chat. I'll read it to you. Can you buy from a related party that was used as their primary primary residence and use it as a rental property?
The answer is absolutely no way, because what we just went into is that you could only buy from a related party if they're doing a 1031 exchange. If that was their primary residence, they can't, because it's not a rental property. So it's disqualified.
So
You
both ends,
cannot buy a rental.
so both ends of
Sorry?
the transaction, both ends of the transaction have to do a 1031.
If when you're buying from them. But if you're selling your relinquished property to them, they're okay with that if both parties hold their respective new properties for 2 years. So it's a little tricky. So when you're selling, you could, but when you're buying, you can't. But in either situation, whether you're selling to a related party or buying from a related party in a legal 1031 exchange where the government approves, you still have to hold both properties, whether the one you're selling or the one you're buying, for 2 years. They always have restrictions. People ask me, well, why would they do that? Here's the answer. Because the government knows that families like to cheat the government, and they're tired of that, and they lose a lot of tax revenue. So this is their way of slowing it down. And that's the answer. Good question. Anything else in the chat room that we need to expose or talk about?
No, now what happens if in the other scenario where you reference Park City, but the person that resided in California decided after the 5 years to move to Park City and retire there? Now that's their primary residence.
Well, first of all, they better go talk to their CPA.
I got
That's
that.
for sure. But if they have a legitimate reason to do that, if you move into it for a legitimate reason, and your CPA feels that they can defend it, guess what happens? Did you sell anything? No. So how are they going to charge you a tax? Because it says on the sale, and you did not sell.
Got it.
You bought. So be careful that you have a legitimate reason. Now, I'm trying to think of the name of this term and I can't think of it. You know, when you do something, they have so many years to come back after you. That's called the I can't believe I can't think of the name of it.
What?
Is that?
Statute of liability?
That's a statute of limitations. Did you know what statute of limitations is? What, 7 years or something? Do you know what the statute of limitations is if you've committed a fraudulent act? There is no statute of limitation. It goes forever. If they feel that you bought that property fraudulently to move into it, there's no statute of limitations, folks. The government can come back and disallow that previous exchange. So California will claw back and the federal government will get their money. Be careful. You got to speak to your CPA. Does that make sense?
Does.
All right. By the way, were you expecting all this today?
A lot of information, but we might have to have you back again.
Darn it. I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to do it. I want to talk about this. Last year, remember all the rain we had? We have a lot of rain this year, but last year we had even more. The IRS launched a extension period if you qualified for it, depending on when it happened and where you lived and the county you lived in. There's a lot of things you have to prove. But if you did, you got an extension on your 45 days and your 180 days. It went all the way to October. Then they even took it to November. Well, people are asking me now, with all the rain that we've been having this year, though it's less than last year, can we get an extension again? So far, the answer is no, because the IRS has not filed anything. But yesterday they did. But unfortunately, it was only for the county of San Diego and some other states. Nothing for any other county in California. So that means no extension. But you know what they said to San Diego, the IRS? You're going to get an extension on your tax return, but it said nothing about getting an extension for your 1031 exchange. So sorry, San Diego, that's where our corporate office is. You don't get an extension on your 45 days or your 180 days, just to file your tax return. That's the way it is. So Is there any extensions for this year? Not so far. Next story. Now, which properties are qualified to go into a 1031 exchange? And this kind of modifies what we already kind of discussed, but I'll kind of go over it again. Remember, can I do a 1031 exchange, buy the property, hold back $50,000 from the exchange from escrow, and then put the money into the property to fix it up so I can rent it? The answer is no. The government will not let you do that because it has to go into the purchase. We're going to talk about a build-to-suit exchange later on if we have enough time. If not, we'll talk about it next time. Number two, may I pay off a loan or build on property that I own, such as my primary residence or a rental, or my family member's primary residence or rental? In other words, it's not going to go into my acquisition. It's going to go someplace else when I do a 1031 exchange. Don't get too helpful or hopeful. The answer is no way. They will not let you do that. In fact, I got another question like that yesterday. Exactly. You cannot do a 1031 exchange and pay off your primary residence, pay off another rental that you own in terms of a mortgage pay down or off your parents' properties, your kids' property. Nobody's. It all has to go into the purchase of the replacement property. All, A-L-L. Any cash that doesn't go into your purchase, even if you're going to put money into the new one after you buy it, is called taxable or boot. You can't do that. So I wanted to highly discourage you from doing that. Next, may I purchase property that I already own? Remember I said, well, I didn't quite say this, but you're a related party to yourself. Did you know that? So you can't buy your own property. You can't. The government won't let you exchange into your own property. But let's say Ruben, you still there? And I own a property together, not in a partnership, but as tenants in common. So you own, let's say, 60%, I own 40%, you own 50%, I own 50%, whatever the percentages are. We own a property together as tenants in common. And let's say it's 50-50, just to make it simple. And the property's worth $2 million. So you own $1 million of it, and I own $1 million of it. All right. What if I sold another property I own and say to Ruben, I want to buy your half out because we are tenant in common owners. I'd like to own 100% of this property. Can I do a 1031 exchange by selling a $1 million building and do an exchange into Ruben's part? He's not a related party to me. Can I buy his half because it's equal or greater than what I sold for? And buy it, even though I own the other half. Ruben, what do you think the answer to that is?
Yes.
You're exactly right. That's why I picked on you. I knew you would know the answer to it. Because I don't own your half. I own my half, but not your half, and we're tenants in common. The government will let me buy your half and do a 1031 exchange into that. So now I own 100%. So that they will let you do. So be careful on all this other stuff because they won't let you do that. All right. Here's what I want to talk about. This is a really, really good. In fact, in my 20 marketing pieces, I actually have one that goes to this slide. Let's say you're dealing with somebody who's owned property in a high net worth area like San Marino, Arcadia, parts of Pasadena, and they bought the property as a principal residence when they were younger. And they had kids and they raised their kids. Now they're sitting on an empty nest. But the property that they bought for $400,000 all those years ago is now worth $3 million as an example. I just pull a number out of the air, 3 million. Well, guess what they have? They have a $2,600,000 capital gain. And when they sell that principal residence, guess what happens? They only get $500,000 max because they're still alive. But they would have to pay taxes on all the difference of the capital gain. So the government says you could either convert the property into a rental, rent it for 2 years. You have to move out of it, rent it for 2 years, and then do a 1031 exchange into another investment property. Or you can take the 500,000 and pay the rest in capital gains taxes on that difference of that 3,600,000 or whatever it is, the difference. So guess what? Guess what happened on Valentine's Day in 2005? That's why I put a heart there. What they did is they changed the law. The IRS says now, if you move out of it, rent it for 2 years, you could do a 1031 exchange, but you're still going to get the $500,000. Now you want to fly those balloons and throw that confetti out. They're going to let you do both. They're going to let you keep the 500 because you lived in it 2 out of 5. But because you moved out of it and rented it out for 2 full years, 24 months, I didn't see any confetti on that. This is like great news. They'll let you do a 1031 exchange and keep the 500 together. So you don't have to replace the 500. You can still put it in your pocket and do the exchange on the balance. So you sell the property for, let's say, 4 million. You have to buy a new property for 3.5 million because you keep the $500,000 or the 250 if you're single. I got a flyer on this. The flyer actually has a link on it. You can touch it, takes you to the IRS website that tells you almost verbatim what I just told you. So this is a great thing. And can you imagine the people you can farm? Just think about it. Primary residents. They have huge capital gains because they've owned it for 20 or 25 or 30 years. They're going to get killed when they sell the property. So why not encourage them, maybe to take a little money out of the property, do a refi or whatever, just buy a condo or something that they can downsize into, rent it out for 2 years, sell it, do an exchange into another property that's going to generate income for them, and still keep the $500,000. It's the best of both worlds. Anyway, that might be a new way to find business, because that can really help you. Most people have no idea that what I just showed you is in existence. And remember, we talked about the trust. I already did that, and I know we're running out of time. There's something called a build-to-suit exchange. I won't go into a lot of detail on it, but the build-to-suit exchange says you can buy property, you can buy down. Let's say you sold for 5 million, you buy for 4 million. We take title to the new purchase. Your client has to take it in 180 days, but they're able to close the purchase almost concurrently with the remaining cash because we bought down. They get to build the improvement while we're holding the property. So when we deed the property to them in the 180 days, they not just bought a $4 million property, but they were able to take the last million and do all these capital improvements to that property while we were taking possession of it. And then we give it to them on day 180 with all the improvements that makes it worth $5 million. And that's a good 1031 exchange. This is very expensive. It's very detailed. I'm not even covering a small part of what they're involved. So just know that there is a build-to-suit exchange, but also know that if you're paying off debt on the property you're selling, this is not going to work because you need to take on debt when we deed the property to you. Because like any 1031 exchange, you have to replace all the cash. And if they're paying off mortgage, you have to reborrow debt. There is a build-to-suit. There is a way to be able to do improvements to the property, but not through a normal 1031 delayed exchange. That costs $1,250. This exchange starts at $9,000 and goes up. Is it worth it?
Wow.
That's up to the client. But it is to some people, depending on what they're going to do. Okay, hey, let me ask you a question. What if I have a rental property, but I'm selling another rental property and I sell it, but I want to build an ADU on the other rental property I have? Is that a good 1031 exchange? The answer is no way, because you're not buying property. You're just simply building on other property you already own. And that is not a 1031 tax-deferred exchange. We can keep talking, but we've got other stuff that we can talk about, as you can see. But we'll pay this. We'll save this for next time. So let's go to the end. I know it's here someplace. A lot of stuff we didn't cover. Here we go, right there. That's my name. That phone number in the blue box is my number. If you want the marketing letters, I'm going to still offer them to you, but you got to promise me you'll use them. I'm not going to ask you to give me anything. I'm not asking you for business, and I'm not going to charge you for my letters. But if you're willing to go out and work and create new business by starting to talk with these investors who've owned their properties for 10 years or longer and start sharing information about something like this, folks, it might start a relationship with them and you'll be able to create a new client. Imagine if you did 100 different investors. That's my email address in red on top. If you want to send me, or you want me to send you those letters, just give me a couple days to get them out to you, and I'll be happy to do it. But Ruben, Peter, I don't think he's here now because he had to leave. Thank you so much. I think this is the first advance I've done for your office in maybe 20 years now. I used to do a couple of them beforehand, way back. But the bottom line is, I think it's the first one I've done at least 15 years. I hope this was helpful to you. Thank you for having me here. I'm honored to be part of Coldwell Banker George Realty and to be able to talk about 1031 exchanges for you, both from a residential and a commercial point of view. Anything else you want to add before we end this thing?
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank you for
welcome.
it's a lot of information, valuable information. I'm trying to absorb and remember everything, but like what I want to say now is that just like an attorney gives legal advice and we defer questions to attorneys or CPAs on matters that have to deal with finances, I want our agents to know that even though it's good for you to know this information and for you to market yourself as someone that knows about 1031 exchange, know that you have Phil here to utilize his services, that, so you don't have to speak with your clients about 1031 exchange. You don't have to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Scared to talk to them about this. There's a lot of higher end clients out there that you have Anthony, you have Phil here to refer that business to, and you'll shine. You'll look like a professional because you're going to be affiliated with Phil. So don't worry about absorbing all this valuable information. Yes, it's good to know, the ins and outs of the 1031 exchange, but you're probably going to forget a good portion of this. You could either go back onto our YouTube and listen to it again, or simply pick up the phone and call Phil.
So happy to talk with you. Hey, Ruben, one more thing.
Yeah.
Just remember, if you want to mark your calendars on March the 12th, I'm doing a Zoom class on the same subject for the West San Gabriel Valley Association of Realtors.
All right.
If you want to log in to West San Gabriel Valley, then I'm going to have this. It'll be pretty close to the same, but I'll manipulate it a little bit. But if you'd like to do that, or go back like Ruben just said, go watch this video because you're going to have it. You said on your YouTube channel or whatever. So, or the first one, whatever you like. But happy to help you out. My staff is ready to speak with you and your clients to make sure that we can give them the information they need. So maybe they'll just work with you and get a listing.
Awesome. Do we have any questions for Phil before we end? Let me see. There's something in the chat. Nope. Just someone saying thank you, Phil.
Oh, you're welcome.
On behalf of Coldwell Banker George Realty, I want to thank you. And I think we'll schedule the final, the third, so we can go through all the aspects of a 1031 exchange.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Carol. Thank you. And have a great day and go out and make some money. Go get some new business because you can do that working with investors.
All right. And if you want those letters, email Phil. I know a lot of you have already from the past session, but if you guys want those letters and start, contact your title rep, get that farm of, probably investment properties that have been, been held for more than 15, 20 years. They probably have a massive amount of equity in there and stuff, so.
And yours are more work.
Yeah, all it's gonna cost you is an email to Phil and a stamp. That's it.
Happy to do it.
All right, Phil, thank you. Thank you,
Ruben.
everybody, for attending. Again, this is gonna be, it's gonna be placed on the YouTube channel probably later on today. Until next time, Phil, thank you.
Have a great day.
All right, folks,
Bye, Ruben.
bye-bye.